Hey, it's a sunny day. Let's go shoot some hoops.
Did you hear I missed a word?
Okay, I'll go back.
I said what instead of why.
Tell me
Why. Sorry. Did you hear I missed a word?
So I'm getting bored.
Okay,
Let's go
said
see
what
a movie or
instead of
something.
why.
So what? I have to go home. It's Saraswati Puja today.
So what is this Saraswati Puja thing anyway?
Well, it is the festival where we honor the goddess of learning, Saraswati. We place our books and pens and musical instruments in front of the goddess. Then we do puja to her.
You do puja, what does that mean?
Well, puja is like worshiping God.
Worshipping God. So not only do you worship the statue of your goddess of learning, but also your books and pens and sometimes even Shivalingas? Why would you do that? Do these things look like gods to you?
Well, no, of course not.
Okay, whatever. I need to leave, so bye.
Okay, see you. Bye. Okay.
Very often, there are discussions about the meaning of puja and the meaning of certain kinds of rituals that Indians perform. There are very clear procedures for performing the worship, which is partly inherited by the church as a tradition, which is partly also written in the Bible, in the New Testament Bible. And then, of course, there are strict limits of interpretation. For instance, during the Catholic Mass, the believers drink wine and eat hostie or bread. Now there is the belief, and it's not important for us to know whether they're true or false. The believers think, or really do believe, that blood becomes wine and bread becomes the flesh of Christ. When Indians discuss about puja, most of the times they want to put it in the same rigid framework of a performance like Catholic Mass. And they ask the question, why does one do a puja? Or why does one perform puja? Why does one perform japas, tapas, yajnas, homas? In other words, all these rituals. Now, Indians try to seek meaning behind it, or at least they do so when they enter into discussion with their friends from abroad in the United States or in Europe. Actually, all of these interpretations could be true, and equally true could be the following interpretation. For instance, well, it could be true that it is said that some puja brings you to heaven, as, for instance, Gita tells you, one of the highest forms of worship is to perform a worship, give up the fruit of the action or the goal of the action. That is, you perform a ritual because you want to attain a heaven, let's say, and at the same time, the highest form of worship is to give up that goal, is to renounce it. So there is only one way we can allow these multiple interpretations to coexist. And the way chosen by modern intelligentsia of the last couple of decades has been to insist on one true, right, correct interpretation. And mostly it happens to be the symbolic ones. Ritual is something that is capable of being interpreted in any number of ways, or even not being interpreted at all. So if you ask in that sense, the question, why should I do Ganesh Puja? There's no answer. There's no goal, there's no meaning, and the goal and the meaning is what you give to it, if you feel like giving it to it. Or you just do it because your father will get angry otherwise. That's a good reason to do the puja as well. In other words, to insist on some kind of a deep interpretation, symbolic or otherwise, is not something that we have learned from our Indian traditions, but something we have inherited from a half-understood Christian theology, which forces us to cast rituals in certain forms, namely as something that carries a deep meaning.
In Indian traditions, puja varies from home to home and from community to community. The ritual practices have also changed over time as we have adapted them to the needs and possibilities of the times. The rituals have no fixed meaning or explanation. The act itself is central, not some underlying fixed doctrine or belief. Just listen to how people give different explanations for why they do puja.
Every Tuesday, I go to Hanuman temple, do my puja. I eat only after my puja.
Ma Durga gives me strength and makes me successful.
Why? He is God. So we do puja. It is our dharma. I do puja. Our parents did puja. and this has been going on for thousands of years.
Difference between puja and worship, and begin with worship. Let's say we look at a religion like Christianity and ask what worship means. Now, worship, as they see it, is a service that human beings render unto God. Now, this service it's not merely a question of doing what one feels like to God, but actually it is to render service to Him according to how He has told you to render service. Now, how He should render service is, of course, precisely what His revelations are. Now, if you look purely at nature and think of a God who has created all these things and do whatever you feel like in order to worship such an entity, you are not truly worshipping Him, but you are doing false worship. So, in order, therefore, to give true worship to Him, He has to tell you, reveal Himself to you, and tell you how to worship. And that is one of the reasons why the British were so much against idolatry, worshipping of idols and images. Now, consider in contrast with this what puja is all about. First of all, of course, how do you learn to perform puja? You're instructed. Now, you could be instructed by your parents, by your grandparents, maybe by a pujari in a temple. It doesn't matter how you get instructed. You get instructed. Let's assume you have done Ganesh Puja in India somewhere, say Bombay or Delhi or Bangalore, and you go to the United States of America, where half the time you have this awful winter. Let's say you're living in the wintry parts of the United States, and you can't do the puja the way you have been taught to do. What do? Well, tells your mother or your pujari, your grandmother, it doesn't matter. Sit comfortably, dressed if possible even in woolen clothes, put your heater on so that you feel warm, and do Manasa Puja. What does that consist of? Well, you simply think of Ganesha in your mind and you offer puja to him. Is it acceptable? Then your grandmother will tell you, look, Manasa Puja is the best form of puja. And they will even further tell you that Ganesha will accept any form of puja given by anyone and in whatever form or fashion. This is what puja is, but there are possibilities for individual additions to rituals, individual changes to pujas, and each individual can develop his own way of performing the puja.
So, tell me, how are things going with the wedding?
It will take more time.
Really? You don't like the girl?
I do like her, but we are waiting for the matching of the horoscopes. Then we will talk further.
I can't believe it. I can't believe that you really believe in this nonsense of horoscopes.
It is not nonsense. Some astrologers are very good. You know, they can tell you the most amazing things.
Man, you're a scientist, and you believe in this superstitious belief of astrology.
Yeah. But what is superstitious about it?
Well, it's just like saying that everything that falls from the sky falls for its love of the earth. It makes no sense. There is no proof. There is no evidence. For God's sake, you're a scientist.
Things fall down because of gravitation.
Often people ask me whether there is any inconsistency, a contradiction between being a scientist or engineer, like on the one hand, and doing puja, doing the rituals and such like on the other, and reading, for instance, stories like Ramayana, Mahabharata. Now, this problem comes into existence, actually, if you look at it seriously, not because there is some presumed incompatibility between being, let's say, a nuclear scientist, but doing puja before you go to the laboratory. Now, this assumption that there must be compatibility between your beliefs is, of course, a reasonableness assumption, a rationality assumption. There's nothing wrong with it. Indeed, we should try to be as consistent and as scientific as possible.
What is the paradox, really? Are Indians really superstitious and irrational just because they practice astrology, do puja, and tell traditional stories?
Yeah. No, I don't eat beef.
Oh yeah, I forgot. You Indians are vegetarians and against the slaughtering of cows.
No, not all Indians are vegetarians. Neither are all Hindus. And Hindus do respect for all living beings.
Really? But with so many people starving in India, beef would provide them the necessary calories for them to survive.
Our religion does not allow it.
So, your religion sanctions the fact that so many poor people die of hunger. Because of what? In the name of what? In the name of respect for life? It's not very rational, is it?
But the scriptures of Judaism and Islam also have all kinds of food restrictions, which are God's commandments to them. It is just the same in our religion.
We don't kill cows and eat them because it's very important for agricultural economy that India is. How the argument doesn't work, because actually buffaloes are more important than cows in Indian agriculture. And besides, if we can replace older tractors, dump them and buy new tractors, why can't we do the same with cows? I mean, eat them and buy new cows. So that argument unfortunately didn't work. And there's of course the third reason. Well, we don't eat cows because for the same reason that the Jews don't eat non-kosher food, or because, for example, that the Muslims don't eat pork. Well, it worked for some time, it looked satisfying, until I began to read into Indian history and discovered old and ancient books which said, in fact, which gave the injunction to eat cow meat, slaughter cows, horses, and so on. So that argument also obviously is not very true. So like this I was wondering what argument I could give and why is it Indians don't eat cow? Then around that time, a plane crashed in the Andes Mountains, and some people were trapped. And what they did was something extraordinary. The dead people were used as meat by the living in order to survive, and they did survive. When I read that, I was deeply shocked, because I asked myself, what would I do were I to have been crashed in a mountain in the same position these people were in? And I realized that I would not have eaten human meat, even if I had hunger, even if I was going to die. So why then did these Europeans who were crashed in the Andes Mountains eat the body of their fellow friends after they died? And then it struck me, something extraordinary struck me, that there have been situations like this in Europe and in Africa. For example, think of the great drought of Ethiopia about a decade or so ago, or the concentration camps that Hitler set up in which Jews were imprisoned. We haven't heard stories of cannibalism either in the concentration camps or in Ethiopia, whereas the people who were crashed in the Andes Mountains did. So what made them actually take to cannibalism? I realized that I could not eat it because I didn't see fellow human beings as food. And then I realized that the real reason why we Indians don't eat beef, or not all of us, some of us Indians don't eat beef, is because we don't see beef as food.
How are you doing?
I'm fine.
I want you to memorize the Vishnu Sahasranam in 2 weeks' time, just in time for the festival.
But Dad, I'm going on vacation. I really won't have time for all of that.
This is our religion. This is our identity. This is who we are.
What? Dad, I really don't have time for all of this. I'm getting late. I need to leave. We'll discuss this later. Please.
The NRI parents in the United States create fictitious moral codes based upon Protestant examples, have these compulsory Sunday schools, and force the children to go to this or that temple, do this or that puja, learn this or the Sahasranamam, and so on. Now, to some it might work, but to many it's going to have an alienating effect, because when they grow up, and in the process of growing up, one thing they will not be able to do is to defend their own traditions in a Protestant form, in a theological form, because Indian traditions are not like that. They should not rigidly codify Hinduism into some version of Protestantism. Trust yourself to transmit it in a flexible way to your own children, because if we don't do that, your children are lost forever. An entire generation not only alienated from India, but also from her tradition, from her culture, from her collective memory.
In India, we used to continue our traditions because they had been passed on to us by our ancestors. We never felt the need to know what the true beliefs and commandments of Hinduism are. We just learned our traditions from our parents as part of our daily life. Our traditions were always very flexible and adaptable. After moving to the U.S., however, we feel we have to fix the Hindu identity, beliefs, and moral codes, as though we need a Hindu church that is a variant of one of the Christian churches in the U.S. What is happening here?
In some senses, there is of course truths to the experience and feeling of Indians in America, the NRI Indians, that they didn't know much about their own religions or their own traditions, as they put it, or like Hinduism, for example, when they came to the United States. Thanks to this or that organization or Swami, I learnt about Hindu tradition in the United States. Now, this is one plausible way of looking at it, but I think this is the wrong way. The other way of looking at it is to realize that America or Europe, or predominantly or basically Christian countries, or at least influenced by Christian cultures. So when they ask the Indians, why do you wear bindi? What is your holy book? Who is your God? Or who are your gods? The Indians succumb to the pressure of these questions. They are succumbing basically to the environment that is Christian in nature. So they fail, of course, in giving a suitable Christian answer to these questions. And therefore they end up forcing their children to go to Bal Vihar, Sunday schools, immerse themselves in learning so-called scriptures of Hinduism, and imposing all kinds of disciplines on the children. But the point is, this problem can be solved, or this issue could be addressed, if they begin to understand that their difficulty arises from their ignorance not of Indian traditions so much as it does from their ignorance of Western culture. So what can we take home from all this? Well, I think different people can take different things. The NRI parents, I think, can take back with them the hope and the confidence about their own traditions, and that they can, if they try, transmit without problem to the younger generation the culture and the tradition they were born into, without getting into a muddle, a pool of anxiety. All it requires is trust and faith in our own tradition. To the NRI children, or the children of NRI parents, what can they take home? Well, basically you are taking home a task, I think. You will have to start thinking differently, start succumbing to the pressure, stop succumbing to the pressures of Christian and Western environment. Not therefore become some kind of a fossilized Indian coming back from the 18th century, but to be in the 21st century world we are living in, within the framework of science and technology that we know. Remember that you have the task, if you like, to rethink, to reassess, to relook, and to relocate both yourself and your own traditions. You see, this entire process, in fact, involves you, me, your parents, your grandparents, all of us, here in India, abroad, in the United States, in Europe. And this is a process which, if you like a Sanskrit term, is called Pratyabhignana. Now what it means is this: the word comes from Abhignana Shakuntala, which means remembering Shakuntala, which is a poetic piece written by one of the greatest poets that ever lived, Kalidasa. And Pratyabhignana means re-remembering, recollecting, and so on, or it also means relearning what we already knew. And this, in fact, is the notion of Indian Renaissance. And I very honestly believe that this is the realizable goal of the next generation and the succeeding generations. And perhaps it is in this task that all of us are standing shoulder to shoulder and pushing the culture, the tradition, the heritage that India is forward in the modern day world as it suits our modern day sensibilities.